teaching and leading people in their Krishna consciousness. And he's based out of Long Island. He comes here to the city regularly. And on a personal note, his Gita wisdom and then inviting Radhanath Swami to be a guest speaker is the reason why I'm in Krishna consciousness today. So I owe everything to him. He's like my father. We love him so much, and we're so grateful that he's here speaking with all of you. Thank you for saving me and so many of us.
Hare Krishna. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasnaya Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Kaline. Thank you, Champaklata, for that bombastic introduction. Someone once told me that praise is like perfume. It's okay to sniff it, but don't swallow. So, yes, all of the things that she said, I've done, and I haven't been able to make a living at any of them. Can you imagine that? Let that be a lesson to you. Pick one thing and stick to it. I was talking with my dear friend Sachi Raj a little earlier today about how philosophy is nice, but hundreds of philosophy books can't hold a candle up to one person who inspires. You meet one person who touches your heart, who helps you to believe that there's a better way to live life, and that maybe it's even possible to touch transcendence, to have some insight into the greater mystery of the extraordinary universe around us. And so I thought I would do this PowerPoint about Srila Prabhupada. In university settings, this is how I would introduce the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So imagine that this kind of a educational setting somewhere, and people don't have extensive background, and you'll get an idea. You can tell me later if you think it works or not. I threw these pictures in just to impress you. That's me as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, whatever, with Prabhupada in different places. The City Hall of Paris, the upper right there. That's with George Harrison down the lower left. Okay, so here's where you'll find me usually in university environments. Somehow getting into the Holocaust history, I think, was an ironic twist. If there's anything that I've understood about Krishna consciousness, it's that it's the opposite of the kind of salvationist assurance that most religions offer. What Krishna consciousness, or bhakti, devotion, teaches us is to become comfortable with uncertainty, to become comfortable with the unpredictable nature of life in the material world. And what's interesting about it is that despite those uncertainties, there is a kind of formula, if you will, a template, that mythologist Joseph Campbell called the Monomyth, or the hero journey. Now this is something I've had a chance to teach on the university level, but given the constraints of time here, I'm going to condense what's usually about 2 hours or 3 hours into about 20 minutes. What Campbell saw was, traveling the world, there seems to be a narrative pattern in the great myths, legends, scriptural tales, hero stories, folklore, and so on, and the lives of great personalities. And this arc, which he called the monomyth, or the hero journey, traces a person leaving the material world, the everyday world, what we might even call the Maya world, and embarking on an adventure. And it can be very complicated, this journey, but there are certain basic beats of the monomyth model that fit rather well. Campbell was enamored of kind of, refrigerator sticker sayings. And one of them was, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." Something about this world that the thing that you most fear is the thing that will rear its head up and slap you in the face time and time again, until you come to recognize that, I don't really have to be afraid of this anymore. When you confront it, you realize that the fear of what has been holding you back from achieving what Campbell calls the boon, the life goal that you wish, is the fear itself, and the reality of that embrace of the shadow, that's a phrase from novelist Ursula Le Guin, is less frightening than it seemed mentally. Here's another one that Joseph Campbell's probably his most famous bumper sticker. There's the full quote here, by the way, is, "If you do follow your bliss, then the universe will open doors where before there were only walls." So here's what the monomyth looks like in kind of a summary form. There's a move out of the ordinary world into an extraordinary place. And as I studied this, it occurred to me that there's something familiar, and I realized that it was reminding me of Prabhupada's life. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. If there's any value to this way of looking at the life of Srila Prabhupada, it's that his life is so miraculous, it's so extraordinary, that you can look at it time and time and time again from 1,000 different angles. And every different perspective will shed new light on what he accomplished and its value for us. So here's a bit of an overview of what the hero journey looks like. It starts with the ordinary world, what we might call the Maya world. I call it the latte syndrome. You get up in the morning, your feet hit the ground, you grab your latte, and you're off and running. And more or less you are today whatever you were yesterday. It's a repeat, it's a pattern, it's a conditioned kind of existence. Then one day something changes. Either voluntarily or forced by circumstances, we're pushed out of that comfortable, mechanical, familiar world by what Campbell calls a call to adventure. Now, not everyone heeds this call to adventure. Some people decline that call. Right? They feel it's not the right moment to effect a major change in their life, or they don't feel up to the task. And it's a very personal decision. There's no right or wrong here. We all grow and mature at our own particular pace. And to effect change can be a very scary thing. Often this call to adventure is coupled with a meeting with a mentor. You'll begin to see the connections with the Krishna conscious journey as I describe this for you. A teacher who points the way to personal growth. If you accept that call, then you embark on what Campbell calls the road of trials. Campbell's phrasing here is important. To grow requires a confrontation with crisis, with temptations, with challenges, setbacks to our determination. And if the hero, and by the way, by hero, it's all of us here. It's not just the great names of history, but it's us. If the hero doesn't shy away from that, then the hero earns the right to cross the threshold into unfamiliar, even supernatural territory that Campbell called the point of no return. It's at this point where there is no going back to the life you knew previously. And at this point of no return, this is when it starts to really get hard. Campbell calls this next step the belly of the whale. Like Jonah. You're in a position where you either transform or you die. Now this death of the old self, or the immature self, if you will, doesn't have to be a physical death. It could be a metaphysical death. It's a giving up of something that we were previously, in order to emerge into the fullness of our adult or spiritual life, if you will. And again, it's unique to all of us. This isn't some rigid template. Campbell himself admitted that there are variations to this model, but there are enough points in common that I think you'll begin to recognize your own life story in the monomyth. It can be the death of your childhood. It can be the immature self that allows the mature self to emerge. It's worth thinking about this also, that you can't reach this point except by the road of trials. You don't earn the opportunity to mature and grow without some sacrifice. The word in the Bhagavad Gita is yajna. There has to be something has to be sacrificed in order to move forward. So those who emerge from this belly of the whale have the opportunity of achieving what Campbell calls the boon. Now, what is the boon? It's the reward, it's the Excalibur sword, it's the buried treasure, the light of knowledge, it's life's true calling, it's the pot of gold in the cave that's protected by a fierce dragon. It has many different forms. Achieving that boon, in our case, it would be knowledge of self as something more than the body-mind duality, gives us one further option, and that is to take that knowledge, to take that boon, return into the world to share it with others. Now again, not everyone is prepared to do that. I have friends who've said, hey, listen, I got initiated, I get it, I'm out of here. I'm going to India and I am not coming back. And that's fine. Not everyone is cut out to be a world preacher, like Prabhupada. And sometimes things happen in stages. So it's not that you can't change your mind afterwards. You take a position and then you continue to grow. The growing is constant. Okay. Well, what is this monomyth model? If you've seen any of these movies, or pretty much if you've seen any movie, you're familiar with the monomyth model. Hollywood loves the monomyth. Hollywood loves the story of an ordinary person who's pushed into extraordinary circumstances and finds out that they're really a Superman or a Superwoman, and they defeat the bad guy and live happily ever after. That's Hollywood. In fact, back in the 1950s, I believe, there was someone whose name escapes me right now, working at Disney Studios, who wrote The Hollywood Hero Journey. It was a take on Campbell that was a kind of a staple read for a lot of screenwriters for many years. And you'll find this hero journey in the lives of people you know or have heard about. It's certainly there in the life of Jesus, who had to go through so many sacrifices in order to bring light into the world. It's there in the Lord of the Rings, if you're familiar with the Tolkien trilogy. It's there certainly in Jason's hunt for the Golden Fleece, Ahab's search for the white whale and Moby Dick. It was there in the freedom marches of Dr. Martin Luther King. What is the hero journey if not the following of a dream? You might be familiar with this children's book, by the way. Anyone know this story of Max, the naughty, mischievous little boy who's sent to bed by his parents without having dinner and dreams of going to the land of the wild things, and there he's got to confront the wild things and overcome them by the magic trick of staring into their eyes without blinking, and comes home and wakes up in his bedroom to find that his dinner is there and it's still hot. His parents have not rejected him. So this model, this is a template, and what's fascinating is you can apply this to your life. I do this about every 3 or 4 years. I'll look at my life, I'll take the hero journey, and I'll say, okay, where am I now? What's going on? It's a fascinating exercise. Then the thought came to me, all right, what about our beloved Vedic tales? Does the hero template fit there? And sure enough, in the story of Prahlad certainly follows this hero journey to become the great sage that he became. It's there in the life of Narada, the life of Dhruva. It's there in the life of Jadbharat. All of the great figures in our Vaishnav Vedic past have gone through similar trials to achieve their position of being mentors and exemplars of devotion to the Supreme Lord. It's certainly there in the life of the Pandavas. I mean, if you read the Mahabharata, someone, I think Jagannath was telling that he saw me do this presentation about, what was it, 8 years ago or something? However long ago it was. And the whole thing was about Star Wars. Because if you look at Star Wars and you compare it with the Ramayana, it's an exact mirror. An exact mirror. And one of the reasons is that Joseph Campbell was a guest of George Lucas at Lucas Ranch in California when Lucas was writing the scripts for the Star Wars films. He basically ripped off the narrative of the Ramayana. If you think of, a monkey hero who helps the young prince release the captured princess who's been kidnapped by the Dark Lord. It's the same story. And certainly initiation is the ultimate hero journey. This is the ultimate turning point in a life where initiation is considered a rebirth into a new life of devotion. So let's look a little bit at Prabhupada's hero journey. He was born in 1896. I think that's important to understand. That's the 19th century. It's not even the 20th century. At that time, Britain was under British rule. Some of the British administrators were sympathetic to Hindus and their beliefs, but for the most part, they were looked down upon. And the message was, until these heathens, these Hindu heathens, come up to the light of European Christianity, they're never going to realize their full potential. Now, if you can imagine, what was the single greatest objection on the part of the British to what they found in colonial India? Any thoughts on what the single greatest offense in Indian culture was to the British? Imagine now what it was like for them coming into India. I mean, a little bit of a hint, okay? It's idol worship. Here's a quote from a Supreme Court judge of England. It is Krishna. Of all of the deities in India, it is Krishna, the darling of 16,000 gopis, Krishna, the love hero, who tinges the whole system with a strain of carnal sensualism or strange transcendental lewdness. There was really no attempt to understand the deeper meaning of deity worship, of Murti Seva, as this elevated, elegant way of remembering that God is a person, and that we have a relationship, personal relationship with God. Here's another quote. The Indian intelligentsia, for their part, they also didn't attempt to try to understand their own Bhakti tradition. They preferred to purge India of anything that the Europeans found objectionable. Here's Swami Vivekananda speaking at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago. Images, deities, crosses, crescents are simply so many symbols to hang spiritual ideas on. Idolatry in India does not mean anything horrible. It is the attempt of undeveloped minds to grasp higher spiritual truth. This is what they call condemning with faint praise. Yeah, it's nothing, don't hold it against them that they worship deities. They're doing what they can, these beginners on the spiritual path. If it wasn't a putting down of Krishna worship, then it was a negating altogether of Krishna. Here you have a commentary by India's first vice president after independence in the 1940s, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, and his commentary on this verse from the Bhagavad Gita: "Be mindful of me with love offered to me, sacrificing for me, acting out of reverence for me, surely you shall come to me." Here was his commentary. It is not the personal Krishna to whom we have to give ourselves up utterly, but the unborn, beginningless, eternal, who speaks through Krishna. So here you have, this is the ordinary, everyday world into which Srila Prabhupada appeared and grew up, and his father, Gaur Mohan Dey, understanding that his son was going to confront a lot of hostility, wanted to see that his son would be equipped with the proper tools, the proper training to confront these kinds of objections to Krishna worship. And in Prabhupada's earlier days, in his 20s and so on, he married, had children, opened a business as a pharmacist, and for all intents and purposes, it looked like he was on his way to becoming a Pakka Sahib, a respectable Hindu gentleman. But now we have what Campbell calls meeting with the mentor, or the call to adventure. In 1922, I believe it was. Is that right, Rameshvara? 1922? And Srila Prabhupada met his spiritual master, and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami saw something in him that made him think, you're the right person to take Chaitanya's teachings about love for Radha Krishna and bring it to the West. Now, if you remember from the earlier stages of the Monomyth model, the next step, I don't know if anyone can call it out, it's the road of trials. Now, strangely, these trials seem to come in threes. If you think, for example, of Hanuman's leap across the Indian Ocean, there were 3 challenges that he had to meet before he could reach Lanka. Things happen in threes for some cosmic reason. Prabhupada confronted a family that was antithetical to his ideas of following this order from spiritual master for a world mission. He tried his best to get things off the ground, because who goes west without money? So he had a business that failed. And then when he tried to get something started in India, nobody would help him. So it seemed clear that Krishna had other plans for him, and now the point of no return, which in Vaishnava life for some people is the entrance into the renounced order. But sannyas, or renunciation, is a spiritual death knell. You're now no longer a part of common society. So this is the point of no return. In my assessment of the story, I think the belly of the whale was literally on that boat crossing an ocean where Prabhupada confronted death twice, 2 heart attacks. Arrived in New York. I'm going to kind of speed this up because I know we don't have a lot of time. Coming to New York, 26 2nd Avenue, not very far from here. First disciples, planting the seeds of Krishna consciousness, and then gradually growing the movement. The temple opens in San Francisco, the first Rath Yatra festival. And of course, for me, I would assess the boon, achieving the boon, as being Prabhupada's books. That, to my way of thinking, is the boon. That he was able to codify the teachings in his commentaries on the seminal Bhakti texts. And here's what's extraordinary about this. In Prabhupada's life, the hero journey continues. It doesn't end with him. It continues through his students. It continues through the work of people like Shonak Rishi and the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies, which is totally upending all of these centuries of misunderstanding promulgated by British historians and people who had no understanding of deity worship or any of the other principles of a devotional life. I'm putting this in because I just love him so much. Bhakti Tirtha Swami and other leaders of Prabhupada's movement who made inroads in Bhakti Tirtha's case in Africa, where he was anointed a village chief for his work on behalf of the indigenous peoples there. Radhanath Swami's eco-village, which has received United Nations appreciation and awards. I'm privileged to sit on the board of directors of the Bhaktivedanta Institute in Gainesville, which I think is doing extraordinary work, identifying the points of tangency between the Vedic cosmology and the cutting-edge ideas of consciousness studies. It's certainly there in the social action initiatives of Food for Life. I had to throw this, of course, in Sankirtan, which is going out now in hundreds of cities around the world. There's this entire kirtan culture that's arisen out of Srila Prabhupada's initiating the chanting in the Western world. It's there in the yoga culture with devotees. For the first time, making the connection between yoga and the root of yoga, which is an opening of, what is yoga after all? It's literally a stretching out of old ways of conceiving of yourself so that you will be open to an understanding of yourself as an eternal soul with a relationship of love with God. Yeah, so that's happening. It's certainly there in the temple of the Vedic planetarium, the 9th wonder of the world, which is nearing completion, and which our dear brother Rameshvara Prabhu is heading up the science museum attached on. If you look at the left side, the temple in the middle on the left is a 6-story building, which is the science museum. And little by little, people are beginning to acknowledge what Srila Prabhupada did. And I finished this presentation by this juxtaposition of the first center in New York at 26 2nd Avenue, 1966, and this photo from 50 years later. And now we're into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th generations of devotees. And I suspect that in the future, history will look back and acknowledge that if there were ever a hero journey that could serve as a model for people looking for encouragement in their spiritual life, it would be in the life and times of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yogesvara Prabhu. That was a beautiful presentation. And now we'll have Adi Purusha Prabhu please come and give your offering, and then Rameshvara Prabhu will be next.
I may not be next. I need a few minutes to change.
Sure.
I cannot.
No problem.
Hey, hi, Adi. Thank you. Thank you, you too.
Okay. Sit down here. A little easier than this. Intrude. Oh, you're going to use that, okay? Yeah. Okay, Hare Krishna. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? All right, we ask you prayers. Please pray to Krishna. Everyone offer a prayer. Whatever we have to say is what Krishna wants us to say. Ask Krishna to bless us. My name is Adi, your servant. Srila Prabhupada accepted me as a disciple in 1974 by Krishna's grace, giving us some small service to do. We were reflecting recently about one of my older godbrothers, Bhakti, and he asked Prabhupada, do we have to specifically ask for pure devotional service? Prabhupada said yes. And then there was another devotee and said, Prabhupada, we see that you want us to be Krishna conscious. Prabhupada said, no. What do you call that? Purva Bhava? Purva Paksha, you flip, he would do that. Wait a minute, you don't want us to be Prabhupada. He said, I don't want you to be Krishna conscious. I want you to give Krishna consciousness. Nothing wrong with the Bhajananandi who sits on the bank of Radhakund chanting all the time, day and night for decades. But if you want to be my disciple, chant 16 rounds and then vigorously preach, because we're meant to give this. And if by some means we don't give it, we're not going to get it. So we have an opportunity to glorify Srila Prabhupada. We ask you to not just be here to hear the glorification of Srila Prabhupada, but to join in the glorification of Srila Prabhupada. Many times we're asked to write a Vyasa Puja, compose, but actually, although copying somebody else's writing, what do you call that?
Plagiarism?
Plagiarism. Yeah, please. It seemed to be improper, even illegal, criminal. I hope that's not mine. Gosh, Krishna. No. Mahajana Kata Sapanta. You've heard that before, Mahajana? What does that mean?
Follow the path.
Follow in the footsteps of the great souls, right? So Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, our great-grandfather, in glorification of his spiritual master, he composed a song. And so for our offering to Srila Prabhupada, we will chant that song, and we ask you to join in that song. And there's two kinds of Vyasa Puja. The Vyasa Puja about the spiritual master, and then the offering to the spiritual master. First person. Prabhupada, you, right? So, let's see. Now these are the words. We can supply the words, which are basically coming from the great-grandfather. But we ask you, besides the words, to add your own personal heart, your feeling. We can't do that. But you can add your feeling to these words. Okay? This was originally written in another language. We have it in English here. Let's see if we remember it. Listen carefully. Gurudev, with a drop of your mercy, make this servant always abide. Grant me strength in adversity, cool my soul that burns with pride. Please join. Ready? We're going to do this together with feeling. Gurudev, with the drop of your mercy, make this servant always abide. Grant me strength in adversity, cool my soul that burns with pride. Do it again. Deeper feeling. Call out to your spiritual master, just like Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, calling out to his guru, deep feeling. Gurudev, with a drop of your mercy, make the servant always abide. Grant me strength in adversity, cool my soul which burns with pride. Just one more Grant me strength in adversity. Cool my soul and burn with pride. Second verse. Guru Dev in Krishna's creation, let me be a vessel of your peace. Chanting the holy name in jubilation. Only then will all my offenses cease. Are you ready? Guru Dev in Krishna's creation, let me be a vessel of your peace. Chanting the holy name in jubilation. Only then will all my offenses cease. Keep feeling. Guru Dev in Krishna's creation, let me be a vessel of your peace. Chanting the holy name in jubilation. Only then will my offenses cease. Thank you, Grandfather. Beautiful. Next verse. Guru Dev, I'm fallen and low. Without your grace, useless am I. Waves of tears would surely flow. Without your love, I soon would die. Red. Guru Dev, I'm fallen and low. Without your grace, useless am I. Waves of tears would surely flow. Without your love, I soon would die. Guru Dev, I'm fallen and low. Without your grace, useless am I. Waves of tears would surely flow. Without your love, I soon would die. Last verse. Guru Dev, your sweet mercy please bestow. This wretched sinner forever to save. You're a swan, I'm just a crow. Keep me as your beloved slave. Your sweet mercy please bestow. We mean it. Let this sinner forever to save. You're a swan, I'm just a crow. And your beloved slave. One more time. Guru Dev, sweet mercy please bestow. Without you, just to say, you're a swan, I'm just a crow. Easy as your beloved slave. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Ready? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Śrīla Prabhupada. So that's an offering to you, Śrīla Prabhupada. And at the end, if everyone just says, Śrīla Prabhupada, you're so wonderful.
Śrīla Prabhupada is so wonderful.
All right, how wonderful is Krishna Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
He told me 3 minutes, so I hope I kept it. Next case.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
I apologize, I have to go.
We've always got to
Yeah.
Mine will not be musically.
It's a tough act to follow.
Dogs,
Children.
very hard.
Do you want me to stand here? You sit.
Please sit.
Sitting is.
Standing is better for you?
I'm sitting.
Sitting is better.
Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Chan, Sri Advaita, Gadadhara, Sri Vyasa Puja. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Well, no, I could go on for hours. Probably. Okay. Hare Krishna. I didn't know I was going to be speaking about Srila Prabhupada here today. I was invited to speak about Srila Prabhupada in a few hours around the corner. It's only 6 seconds after, so I'm part of that program. So I'm not going to read what I wrote for that. Instead, I want to try to share I think someone said before they get very emotional talking about Prabhupada. I get very emotional as well, so please excuse that. I wanted to share some of my understanding, my limited realizations about who Srila Prabhupada is and what he has done for us. Do you remember first canto? It's not in the back. No, all the cantos except first are there.
Really?
It's okay, if it's not here, I wanted to read something that Srila Prabhupada wrote in the first canto, which I'm going to read from my phone. Although we all love touching books and holding books. In the first canto, there are 2 chapters, chapters 5 and chapter 6, where Sri Narada Muni appears before Sri Vyasa and instructs him and also tells him that his own story of how he became the son of a maidservant at a time when his mother was serving great rishis. And he took that birth, and in that camp, as a young child, he's listening to these great rishis while his mother is serving them. this was a place in a what's described as another millennium, the prior millennium. Does anyone know what a millennium means in Vedic cosmology? I'll explain it. It's a full day and a full night of Lord Brahma. That is one millennium. So a day of Lord Brahma is 4 yugas, 4,320,000 years times 1,000. That's Lord Brahma's day. So that is 4,320,000,000 Earth years. That's Lord Brahma's day. He also, at the end of his day, enters into a state of yoga nidra, where he and everyone living in the universe is brought back into the body of Bhagavakshayi Vishnu. And that is Lord Brahma's night, which is also 4,320,000,000 of our Earth years. So Narada is explaining to Vyasa what happened to him in the last millennium. So that's 8 billion years ago. So at that time, in that camp of these great rishis, where his mother was a servant, by Krishna's arrangement, his mother was taken from him. A poisonous snake bite caused his mother to leave her body when he was 5 years old. And part of his life story is then told to Vyasa how he took into his heart the instructions of these rishis and sages and went out into the forests at the age of 5 years old, alone, walking through the most dangerous places. More dangerous than when Lord Chaitanya even went through the forests and encountered elephants and tigers and the animals that he awakened and had them chanting Hare Krishna and dancing. That didn't happen with Narada. But with Narada, he was just a 5-year-old boy meditating in the way he was taught on a mantra that he was given, and the Lord was so pleased with him that he appeared in his effulgent, unlimitedly gorgeous form, and every part of Narada's body and senses and mind spiritually was awakened. His body was not acting like a material body anymore. Just by seeing the Lord, every part of his body was erupting and acting just to run after the Lord. Every cell, every atom within his body was just as if independently running to Krishna. This is an amazing description of what happens when you see Krishna for the first time. And then Krishna disappeared. And he was losing his mind in anxiousness and hankering how to get that back. So now he was trying mechanically to meditate and see Krishna again. You cannot achieve seeing God through mechanical means, through any kind of limited exercises or meditation. That will not enable us to reach Krishna. But Krishna wanted to give his mercy to this little boy. And so Narada heard and experienced Krishna through sound vibration. His form was gone, But the sound of God is non-different from God himself. And so Krishna spoke to Narada and told him, I regret to inform you that you will not see me again in this lifetime. I have shown myself to you so you will spend every moment, every fraction of a moment hankering for me, running after me, searching for me, wanting to be with me. But you will not achieve me again in this life. But you will be so filled with eagerness and hankering that it will reach a level, unlimited level of desire. And that will completely extinguish anything in your heart that's tinged by the modes of nature, even the mode of goodness. Every aspect of the material energy will be burnt away by that eagerness to serve me and be with me. And thus, at the end of his boy life, Prabhupada describes it as like in a storm, there's lightning, the sound, lightning, and then there's the effulgent reaction of seeing, that incredible light from lightning. So in that way, Prabhupada says, so he died and instantly appeared in a full spiritual body. Instantly. Like, is there any time difference between when lightning bursts and you can see the burst? That's how quickly Narada changed from being in a material body to actually being a spiritual body. So when he's talking to Vyasa, it's now in that spiritual body. And he's describing how when Brahma at the end of his day, went into this state of yoga nidra and everything in the universe went back into Garbhodat Vishnu, so he did, even in his spiritual body. So these are inconceivable concepts to us. How do you enter a state of trance from 4,320,000,000 years, Brahma's night, and then come out again? But now, this Narada talking to Vyasa is the Narada who attained a spiritual body in his last life, went into Garbhodat Vishnu for that many years, and now is out again. So it's the next millennium. That's what a millennium means. Anyway, so now he's describing to Vyasa what it means to be Krishna conscious, to be God conscious. What is the state of consciousness of such an associate of God? And that's what I wanted to read, one little description of this, because it perfectly describes Srila Prabhupada. What was revealed to us by Prabhupada on very rare occasions was that he entered this world with the consciousness of an eternal resident of Goloka Vrindavan, an eternal associate of Krishna and Radha and all of the eternal leelas in Goloka Vrindavan. That was in Prabhupada's consciousness, and it was temporarily withheld while he was going through the phases of this life that Yogesvara Prabhu described. It's just like gopis, the gopis who became, or who appeared as Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. Their consciousness is from Goloka Vrindavan, but for part of their appearance, they were acting in a very ordinary way as ministers in a Mohammedan government, right? They were not manifesting at that point that they are gopis from Krishna Loka. Similarly with Śrīla Prabhupada, this is the point I'm trying to make. In this life that we connected to Prabhupada, this was not someone who had first become Krishna conscious and then became a guru. No, This is someone who descended, who was sent into the universe, and at a certain point in time, completely manifest that. His true identity, his true consciousness. That's the difference between the eternal associates of God who appear for God's pastimes, like the Goswamis, like Ramananda Roy, like the most intimate associates of Lord Chaitanya, and like Srila Prabhupada. Not a soul on his way up, but he's already a Nityasiddha who was sent here for the mission, and around the year 1965, he left India to carry out the order of his pure spiritual master to present Krishna consciousness in English to the whole world. And from presenting it in English, it would be translated and taken to every country, every town, every different nation in different languages. I mean, today, what, there must be 90, 100 languages of Prabhupada's books being translated into. So, getting back to Narada describing what it means to be a pure devotee to Vyasa, this description will apply to, I don't know anyone else it will apply to, but it will apply to Śrīla Prabhupada, without question. So, the fact that he walked the earth is a miracle. The fact that we had any contact with such a soul, with such a person, is just a causeless miracle. Undeserved, inconceivable that tiny little insect-like beings were scooped up and turned into somehow his servants. And it's just, he's a resident of Goloka Vrindavan who walked the earth. I don't want that point to ever be lost or mistaken. That is the difference between Prabhupada and everyone else that we know. Everyone else that we know is his servant. Your guru, the senior Vaishnavas, the devotees all around the world, they are all in love with him. They're all his servants. Their service is to connect everyone to him, Srila Prabhupada, as your eternal Siksha Guru. That's the job description of our ISKCON gurus. Bring you to your eternal Siksha Guru from the Goloka Vrindavan, who gave teachings that are supposed to endure for 10,000 years on our planet. So generation after generation after generation of our gurus and our senior Brahmins and everyone, and our book district will all be connecting everyone to their Siksha Guru. And if we do that purely, it will be like you are in his presence. 50 years, 100 years, 500 years from now, those devotees will be in Prabhupada's presence if the gurus do their job correctly. So, this is a purport that Srila Prabhupada wrote in Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 6. It is a purport to text 33. The translation says, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart, as if called for, as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. Now, Prabhupada's going to explain what this means. Purport: the absolute personality of Godhead is not different from his transcendental name, his form, his pastimes, and the sound vibrations thereof. As soon as a pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, engages himself in the pure devotional service of hearing, chanting, and remembering the name, fame, and activities of the Lord, at once he, that's capital H, the Lord, he becomes visible to the at once Krishna becomes visible to the transcendental eyes of the pure devotee by reflecting himself on the mirror of the heart by spiritual television. Therefore, a pure devotee who is related with the Lord in loving transcendental service can experience the presence of the Lord at every moment. This is a state of consciousness that is not what we were born with. We were born into the human form on the earthly planetary system, and our consciousness is just one step above the animal species. This human life is the beginning of one step above animal life. Now, there's all gradations of consciousness that can awaken in different species of humans, in different planetary systems of humans. We are born in the earthly realm, all of us here in this room, so our consciousness, our senses, our mind are all contained by the modes of nature in our somewhat limited, puny mind, senses, and intelligence of this human form. Just to give you a gross example, we read in the Vedas these amazing descriptions that life is on every planet in the universe, including on the moon planet, where there is celestial civilization. Now, we can send probes and satellites and devices to land on the surface of the moon and not see that. We can have telescopes that float in outer space aiming at the moon and not see that. How is it that with this great power of magnification, or even physically having an instrument land there, we can't see what the Vedas are describing? Because we were not born on the moon with a body that is subtle and has the consciousness to enter into this amazing celestial world on the moon. It's outside the range of our consciousness. We can be staring at it but not see it. This is a practical example of how here on earth our human consciousness, till we become devotees, our human consciousness is limited. And any mechanical attempt to expand our sense perception, our understanding through mechanical means will not be changing our consciousness and will not enable us to understand this universe and what to speak of what is on the outside beyond the shells of the universe. So here we have a description of Narada, and in my humble estimation, a perfect description of Srila Prabhupada. At every moment, internally, Prabhupada is thinking of Krishna, hearing about Krishna, singing and chanting Krishna's name, and at every moment, Krishna is manifest within his heart to Srila Prabhupada. So he might be sitting in a room talking to us, but the true Srila Prabhupada, while he's doing that, is having this amazing, he's seeing Krishna. It's almost with great effort he would come out of that trance to even emerge to talk to us. But he never, for even a moment, did not see Krishna, was not with Krishna. This is beyond our understanding of even a devotee. This is an Uttama Adhikari avatar. Srila Prabhupada came into this universe to present these teachings in English by the order of Krishna and by the order of the gurus in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But the entire time that Prabhupada walked this earth, there wasn't a moment where he was not seeing Krishna or speaking to Krishna. Now this may sound impossible to us, but if I have a few more moments, I'll tell two quick stories. One of my dear godbrothers, he's since left us. His name is Sarabi Prabhu. Sarabi was an architect in, I think, the Netherlands or Belgium, some part of Europe. And he was visiting India, searching, when he met Srila Prabhupada. Not by accident. And Srila Prabhupada engaged him in designing and overseeing the construction of the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan. And then Srila Prabhupada engaged him in designing and overseeing the construction of our Hare Krishna land temple in Juhu Beach in what was Bombay, now Mumbai. That entire complex, he designed and oversaw the construction. So his service was so invaluable. So as he was getting ready to leave the world, very interestingly, he wanted to come and see Rukmini and Dwarkadish, the deities of New Dwarka. And I was there when he came to visit. This is just maybe 5 years ago or so. I don't remember the exact time, but I just happened to be on one of my visits to New Dwarka, and he was speaking. This is the first time he ever saw Rukmini and Dwarkadish. So when the deity doors opened, he was having great difficulty speaking and composing himself. He was very emotional, almost crying, trying to contain that emotion while he was looking at these deities, and none of us knew why. It's the first time he ever saw them. And when he started to speak, he started telling us that he owed his entire relationship with Srila Prabhupada and all the amazing service that he did and the constant association he had with Prabhupada as Prabhupada was watching over them, designing these temples. He said he owes it all to Rukmini and Dwarkadish. And we're all sitting there saying, what on earth is he talking about? Have you heard this story before?
No.
Oh, okay. So one day, in their construction office in Bombay, when Srila Prabhupada was there, looking at all the drawings and specifications that, there's reams of drawings and so on, to design a complex like our Hare Krishna Juhu Beach Hotel and Mandir. So while Prabhupada's in there, they were talking. And Surabhi asked Srila Prabhupada, he expressed how fortunate he felt just to be able to do this service for Srila Prabhupada. He was kind of overwhelmed at that moment with Prabhupada standing right there. And then Srila Prabhupada told him the following story, that some years earlier, that's not my fault. Okay. Some years earlier, Srila Prabhupada had already envisioned this complex, this temple, this amazing, like transcendental place of pilgrimage of our movement. And he's imagining, envisioning this while he was visiting New Dwarka. Prabhupada visited New Dwarka. Other than 26 Second Avenue, there's no other place in the Western world that Prabhupada spent more time than at New Dwarka. So while he was on the Vyasa looking at Rukmini and Dwarkadish and giving a class, singing Jai Radhamani and giving a class, unbeknownst to all of us, I was there for all of the times Prabhupada went to New Dwarka to speak. Unbeknownst to all of us, he's giving a class, but he's also having a conversation with the deities, where he's explaining to Lord Dwarkadish, the deity, that he plans on building this amazing temple complex for his pleasure right here in Los Angeles, right in this location. And he's like giving a class, but he's offering this to the deity at the same time. That is the sublime state of consciousness of a pure devotee. He can externally interact with us, but internally he's interacting with Krishna. And then Prabhupada told Surabhi something amazing. He said, I got into a type of argument with the deities. So we're sitting in the temple listening to this. What do you mean you got it? What do you mean Prabhupada said he got into an argument with our deities? What is it? Our minds are already like shattered by this. Because the deity, meaning Dwarkadish, Lord Dwarkadish told Srila Prabhupada, I love this, but I don't want you to build it here. I want you to build it in Bombay, on the Hare Krishna land that we just bought, with great effort. And Prabhupada, still giving the class, but he's speaking to Krishna saying, no, this is my world headquarters in the Western world. I want to build this grand temple complex for you here. And again, the deity is telling Prabhupada, I love the beauty of that, but not here. No, I do not want it here. I want you to build it for me there. None of us ever heard of this type of interaction between Prabhupada and a deity. Until Surabhi told us this story, exactly what Prabhupada told him. And so as Prabhupada was concluding the story, he said, therefore, of course, I completely surrendered to meaning Dwarkadish's wishes, and I planned on building this entire beautiful complex here in Mumbai, and then Krishna sent you to me to work for me in designing this and overseeing the construction. And that is how you came to be in India and met me and have been engaged all these years. Both the Krishna Balaram Mandir and then, of course, the Mumbai temple. So Surabhi, this is like one of his last acts in his life. He had to come before Rukmini and Dwarkadish. He had to pray to them and thank them with all his heart for their mercy that caused him to be engaged by Srila Prabhupada while he was visiting India, because they ordered Prabhupada to build it there and not. So I'm telling you this story because while Prabhupada is externally speaking, going on morning walks, giving classes and doing all these activities, building this movement, planning, giving loans and grants to build temples all over the world, through all of this activity, Prabhupada's talking to Krishna, seeing Krishna. There's nobody else that we know could be doing this other than a resident of Krishna Lok, who's always seeing Krishna but is down here in the material universe performing some leela, some pastimes to save the conditioned souls. And I will just tell you one more quick story, and this has to do with when Prabhupada is translating his books. He liked using the time when all the devotees were asleep so that he would not be distracted, because he had to concentrate so deeply, because as he's speaking, these divine sounds of these texts and these purports, as he's speaking them externally, internally, he's presenting his translation work to Krishna. And sometimes Krishna is speaking to him, make this change, say it in this way. You could not see that if you were in Prabhupada's room while he was translating, that there is this pure spiritual dimension to Srila Prabhupada, where he's writing his books with Krishna, and Krishna and Prabhupada are having conversations as he's writing his books about the books, the words, the text, the purports. Prabhupada told us this. On a very rare occasion, a few devotees were told this. I was privy to that because I was the PBT trustee for the English books. And so I got to see on 2 occasions Prabhupada actually translating. And the last time I saw it was in the Kumbh Mela festival of January 1977. That was a very big Kumbh Mela. Holy Indian government was there, like India, everyone was there. And we were in a tent. It was very windy. And I was Prabhupada's secretary. And the space heater, which was powered by some gas, what do they call it? Little tank of gas. The flame kept going out because of the wind. So my job for those 10 days was to stay up all night with Srila Prabhupada while he's translating. I'm relighting this space heater 100 times every night. Every time it goes out, just to make sure that Prabhupada is not disturbed by the cold climate and winds. And so, while I'm doing that, trying to be invisible, not to distract Prabhupada, but he had already told me at a private time that this is how he writes his books. And there I am, in his presence, doing this menial service, while he is doing this unbelievable service of giving the universe these books, giving the world these books. These books, Prabhupada told me during our Chaitanya Charitamrita marathon, they're non-different from Krishna himself. They're like deities. The books are deities. At one point in that 2-month marathon, I asked Prabhupada, I said, Srila Prabhupada, on behalf of all the press devotees who are doing this marathon for the Chaitanya Charitamrita to come out, what category of devotional service are we in? We know externally what we're doing, but what is the category of devotional service? And Prabhupada said, as you are working on producing the books, all of you, giving up everything for this, the category is called deity worship. You are preparing the deity. You are decorating the deity. You're adorning the deity. That's deity worship, Prabhupada told me. And then he said, when you send it to the printer, and when it comes out for our book distributors, the category changes from deity worship to Shravanam Kirtanam. Now this is Kirtanam for the whole world, the distribution. And so in this way, Prabhupada directly told us that his books are not different from Krishna. These sounds that he speaks are the sounds of the spiritual world. They are divine, eternal sounds that are in his books, that will become the law books for humanity, that will save humans from becoming animals again. That's what Prabhupada has given all of us and the world. That's what he came here to do. He was sent here to do. There's no question of us deserving his gift, but we have to accept it, even though we're not qualified or deserving, because that's his desire, his love. You know, one last thing I just have to say. Whenever Prabhupada was in a temple, there were all these different devotees of different statures and different genders and different backgrounds, different nationalities. They're all very individual devotees, hundreds of them, in the temples where Prabhupada gave classes. And every single one of them is just completely in love with Prabhupada and feeling that Prabhupada is loving them back. And every devotee around the world while Prabhupada was walking this earth will tell you the exact same thing, that wherever they were, love was awakened, real love, not anything they had ever experienced, even for their parents or their girlfriends or boyfriends or families. Real love was awakened, and they were feeling it and just loving Prabhupada so much. We're all so different, yet everyone loved him, and he loved everyone back. This is not human. This is beyond superhuman. Only someone from the local Vrindavan has that effect to awaken such love in everyone. And by reading the sounds that are in his books, that can happen generation after generation after generation. So you'll not only become filled with knowledge and ecstasy, but you'll also be filled with love. And for that, Prabhupada, we have no way to repay you other than to pray that in all our coming births, please let us just take birth as your servant over and over and over again. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai.
Great Rameshvara Prabhu.
Jai!
Sorry, I spoke so.
Thank you so much for speaking. Thank you so much, Ruth. That was really inspiring.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so thank you so much for giving us a special offering. We're going to move on to our other offerings for tonight. Atita and Chandra, would you like to come give your offering?
He's over.
Huh?
You sure he's in his own channel?
Yeah.
Yes, somebody else go first.
Okay. We have.
Sure.
Do it standing now.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai. We feel like a glowworm to the sun after hearing Rameshvara Prabhu and Yogesvara Prabhu earlier as well, and the Prabhupada disciples. As I was coming here, I stopped by 26 2nd Avenue and had darshan. I'm guessing some others of you may have done the same. To check in with Prabhupada there. We always feel his presence in that site, as we do in all of his temples, but then in some places that presence is so much stronger. And so as I was having darshan of Prabhupada there, I was reflecting on darshan. Darshan is to see Krishna, to see the spiritual master. And so in India there's this idea of saddarshan, or six philosophies or 6 worldviews, 6 ways of seeing. So I was thinking about 6 darshans of Srila Prabhupada, Saddarshan from Prabhupada. One is to see the places of Srila Prabhupada's pastimes, like 26 2nd Avenue, or Los Angeles, New Dwarka, there's Prabhupada's rooms there as well. And in Dallas or in Melbourne, Australia, we also have Prabhupada's rooms in Vrindavan and Mayapur. So seeing those places connected with Prabhupada's pastimes, the Radha Damodar temple, where Prabhupada's rooms are, where he stayed as he planned the worldwide Sankirtan movement, it's a way that we can have darshan and to feel Prabhupada, to be touched by Srila Prabhupada and have his, to be moved, to remember Prabhupada and to also be seen by Prabhupada, hopefully, as we offer prayers unto him. And so that's one type of darshan that is available to us and to all of you. So lucky being here in New York City. Not only is there 26 Second Avenue, there's a Tompkins Square Park and other places of Srila Prabhupada's pastimes in upper west side. There is a place where Prabhupada stayed near to Dr. Mishra's ashram and gave talks as well, because Prabhu lives in that area and he likes to talk about how Prabhupada just lived around the corner from where he is, and he feels Prabhupada's pleasant presence in that site. And so to think that a descendant from Goloka Vrindavan walked among us in this world and that we can visit those places, and those places have been made transcendental by Prabhupada's presence. So that's one darshan, one of 6 darshans that we will briefly reflect on. Another darshan is when we read Prabhupada's books. Rameshvara Prabhu was speaking so wonderfully about Prabhupada's writing and how this is a revelation given to him by Krishna that he then translates into our language and shares with us in our time using our examples that we can understand him. The other thing that he's doing, and is very unique to his presentation, is he really simplifies. He gives us the essence. Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. And so when it says Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Prabhupada says Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said. Or when it says Buddhi Yoga, or Jnana Yoga, or Karma Yoga, or any other yoga, Prabhupada will say Bhakti, devotional service to Krishna. And so he's very consistent in his language and very consistent in his messaging, and he makes it really simple and accessible to us. And so he's giving us darshan, helping us to move very quickly through complex philosophical ideas. Don't get bogged down by those, just come to the essence and see Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So by having darshan of Prabhupada's writings, we are also given darshan of Krishna. Another darshan that I was reflecting on is Prabhupada's disciples. We have Rameshvara Prabhu, we had Yogesvara Prabhu speak, we have our Diksha Gurus and Shiksha Gurus and other preachers that when we are in their association, we get a little sense, a little glimpse of Prabhupada, and we're also touched by Prabhupada, and their love for Prabhupada is so great. When they speak of him, there's this emotion. Actually, when I used to travel with Indrajuna Maharaj, and we would travel all over the world, I served him for 18 years. South Africa, Australasia, we would be in many different countries, and then we would come to the United States. And the thing that we loved the most about traveling in the United States of America is that there are so many Prabhupada disciples. And so, of everything, those were the sites that we wanted to see, or the places we wanted to be, where the disciples of Prabhupada were present, because every time we would come into their association, we were reminded of Prabhupada by their love, by their words, by their demeanor, by their personality. There is something that conveys, something that carries in Prabhupada's mood through his disciples. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling and he met devotees, and he noticed something about them, how they were ecstatic in their singing and dancing, and he said to them, "Are you connected in some way with Madhavendra Puri?" And they were. There was something about them. And so with the disciples of Prabhupada, there's something about them, a sort of mood of devotional service. And so that's another way that we get to have darshan of Srila Prabhupada. Another darshan is the way we come to see the world ourselves. When we visit the places of pilgrimage, when we read his books, when we associate with his devotees, our own darshan, our own worldview changes. We see things differently. We start to see things through the Bhaktivedanta purports. We're seeing the world as Krishna's energy. We're seeing all living beings as part and parcel of Krishna. Not even Vishnu, not even as may be explained in other teachings, but Krishna as Prabhupada, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we see everything in relation to Krishna. And so this is a way that our darshan of the world itself is transformed by this association with Prabhupada and his devotees and his places and his purports. Another darshan that we have, that we're so fortunate to have, is Prabhupada's the media of his pictures and film. So Prabhupada, we are very fortunate that photographers and cinematographers traveled with Srila Prabhupada. And in the books, most of the pictures are very formal. Prabhupada sitting on a Vyasa, and as is appropriate, he's there in the books as a guru. But I also love seeing the pictures of Prabhupada walking on the street here in 2nd Avenue, or standing in line at an airport waiting to board a plane, or sitting in a seat in a Boeing 747, or riding in New Delhi or some other place in the world. So these very less formal pictures of Prabhupada, but show us how he lived among us, and walked among us, and breathed our air, and resided in the same space where we are. And so these images that we have, the film that we have, the biographies that we have, well, that's connected to the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And lastly, the last darshan that we have of the 6 is Prabhupada's movement. Prabhupada's movement is here, and it is growing around the world, and anywhere, pretty much any major city of the world that you go to, you'll find Prabhupada's temple. And when you enter Prabhupada's temple, there'll be Prabhupada's murti. When you see the altar, you'll see Prabhupada there with the disciplic succession. And there's a certain flavor of Krishna consciousness. And we are given an opportunity to contribute in some way, to participate. And when we participate in the Sankirtan movement started by Srila Prabhupada, there is a special flow of mercy that is available to us. We can have great, rapid spiritual advancement by doing some service, being in some way connected by this portal, these portals that Prabhupada has established all around the world, giving us darshan of Krishna and the spiritual world and bhakti yoga and the practice of devotional service. And so these 6 darshans then are 6 meditations on how we can see Prabhupada and receive his mercy in this time and going forward for generations to come. So, thank you very much. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Shri Prahlad. Ratna Prabhu, would you like to come give your offering?
Śrīla Bhakti Vedanta Swami. Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pachari, Devi Sesha Sundara, Krishna, Devi Shatari, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. My wife and I have just come one block away, from 22nd Avenue to here, and feeling how Srila Prabhupada's movement or Srila Prabhupada's service
to the Krishna consciousness movement began there, but all over the world, and now is here 1 block away. And it's remarkable. Must be some special energy to this vicinity. I never got to experience that energy at the time. Although I was a child of the same era, I visited New York in those years, from upstate New York. And I probably was somewhere, I remember being close by. And it brings to mind a song that one devotee, TK, wrote about just thinking, hey, I was there. I was there, but I didn't connect. It took some time for me. But my connection actually began through 26 2nd Avenue. I was a student to satisfy my parents, although my inclination was to just simply hit the road when I left high school. To satisfy them, I said, okay, I'll try college. So I went to a college in Antioch College. And they had a system where they would have classes, you do coursework, 2 semesters, you'd have a break for one. They had 4 semesters, so one was a break, and then one where you were supposed to go and do some practical work or something like that you would then write about, etc. So I learned later on about this, but you'll read about it if you read the stories of Srila Prabhupada, how one young man showed up at 26 2nd Avenue from Antioch College and said, I'm here, I'm going to, this is my kind of choice of what I'm going to do for this few months that I'm off, and what do you have for me to do? And they said, what can you do? Well, I'm a good typist. Yeah? Wow. Can you transcribe? Yeah, I've done that, yeah. Transcribe tapes, yeah, I've done that. God send, Krishna send. They have just acquired the dictating equipment for Srila Prabhupada, who had been typing, by hand his manuscripts, and now he's got this. And that's a wonderful story in and of itself. How Gardamuni goes and finds this dictaphone machine and spends like an hour or so learning how to use it and just all out. And he brings it to Srila Prabhupada and says, okay, now I've got you a dictaphone machine, and I know how, I've learned everything how to do it. And Prabhupada said, don't worry. It's okay. I'll do it. I know it. And immediately he's just using his Gardamuni sitting there, wait a minute, I spent hours learning this, and you just do it? But then these tapes are coming out. These tapes, now they've got to be transcribed. They're going to be typed. So anyway, Neil, yeah, I can do that. And he was at it. And he was catching up. And he caught the bug to some extent. Went back to Antioch College and began Sunday feasts. And so that was my first kirtan in Antioch at Neil's feast. I went afterwards, I said, because it was quite something, what was going on here? So I went later to talk to him, but he was pretty mixed up. Some Buddhism and some this and some that. Doesn't make any sense to me. So like that, my progression in Krishna consciousness has been, like many of us, a little bit here, a little bit there. Little doses that build up until you're overwhelmed. The viral load becomes such that you catch it, right? You catch it, you're infected, and you become infectious. But this is the disease that we all aspire for. This is the disease of the counter disease, the disease that counters all disease, the disease that brings out our love of God. So I have maybe 1 minute or two, or I'm finished. Huh? We always, generally speaking, we find that devotees, when they advise us old guys and girls to come, they like to hear stories. So I told some stories over there at 26th Avenue. I'm going to tell one more that is something that will be meaningful to some of you, maybe not so meaningful to others. I had a service in 1970, 73, 74, I think it was, to try to raise funds for the food distribution program in India, the food relief, ISKCON food relief. And so I was thinking about various ways to do that. And I thought, let me go to the corporates. Let me see if I can get some, At the time, I was already a little, I had begun teaching at Fordham University. And so I had bought a suit, and I had grown my hair and so on. And so I felt I looked the part. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to approach these corporates for donations. But I thought, they might get a little turned off by all this Krishna stuff. So I rented in those days you could, and still can, rent a address. I rented a mailing address with phone number and everything on East 42nd Street. And I made a letterhead. And the letterhead simply had ISKCON at the top. And down at the bottom it was, 41 East 42nd Street and some phone number. And I went to different offices and gave my request for appointments. Anyhow, fast forward, Srila Prabhupada has come to New York, and I'm sitting in my office in the Henry Street Temple, and I think it was Ananda comes up and says, Srila Prabhupada wants to see you. And he didn't say what for. And I come down to his quarters, and that desk that I sat in front of is still there in Brooklyn. You can see it. And I sat there. What did I see on the desk? A copy of my letterhead. And Srila Prabhupada is looking at this and says, where is International Society for Krishna Consciousness? Where is Founder Acharya? I guess I was intelligent enough to not say anything. But simply, be there. So, you won't do this again? He was relatively light on me. But it's one of those things that sears in your memory. So that's seared in my memory. There's just one more I'll end with. It's seared, and this is something because that's a lesson for us all, right? Whenever there's ISKCON, ISKCON means Krishna consciousness. It's not just an acronym like Exxon or something like that. Something that we want to be, we want something that'll, marketing. It's not a marketing thing. Yes, it is an acronym, but it is Krishna consciousness, and you can never separate that. And we can never separate Srila Prabhupada from ISKCON. Or ISKCON for Srila Prabhupada. Just a short other little anecdote as a lesson, because this one I think is not so well understood in our society. I was present in New York, and one of the leaders there, he was actually the GBC, was sitting in front of Srila Prabhupada, and he had his Bhagavatam, and he laid out his chatter very nicely on the ground, on the floor before him, and he put his Bhagavatam on there. And Srila Prabhupada turned to him. The book must be higher than you. Another little lesson. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you, Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Pancha.
Prabhupada today, Śrīla Bhakti Swami Tingle, Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Vachamane, Nivishesha, Shunvari Paschachari Satarani. So, I joined Krishna consciousness in 1975 in New Zealand, and the temple president was a very good philosopher, and he kept on saying something, and it really struck me, and he kept on saying, all your spiritual desires will be fulfilled. And I was a bit cynical, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go for the top. So what's an almost impossible spiritual desire at that time, 1976? The spiritual desire was, I want to personally be initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And at that time, Prabhupada might have wanted to go to certain places, but it didn't happen because of health and different things. So here I was in Australia by this time, and he was supposed to come in April 1976. So I was praying. I have a spiritual desire to be personally initiated by Srila Prabhupada. So he came in the end of April, and so I decided to test this. So it was time. It was the day to get initiated. Srila Prabhupada came, and that was a whole other story about seeing him in the airport. In those days, the devotees took over airports. The devotees came, and forget what else was going on. Devotees chanted and danced, and that's all people saw in the airport on that day. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada came, and the next day it was time to get initiated. And I used to look after a little girl there, about 4 years old, and she actually was wearing a little, like a pink sari, right? So she grabbed my hand when it was time to go up to see Srila Prabhupada. She grabbed my hand, and we both went up to see Srila Prabhupada. We paid our prostrated obeisances, which the ladies did at that time. And then she got up and she said, Srila Prabhupada, does that mean I'm initiated now? and he said no. And then, he asked me the 4 regulated principles and why they chanted 16 rounds like that. And in those days, Srila Prabhupada's secretary would actually give out the names. So I went up and was standing in front of Srila Prabhupada, and he looked at the piece of paper and he said, so your name is Anita. And he said, no it isn't. It's not Anita. Anita is not a Vaishnava name. Anita means without a path. And we Vaishnavas have a path. So he said, so your name is Atita Guna. And then I was thinking, yeah, he personally initiated me. It wasn't just personally, he actually gave me my name.
Haribo. Atita Guna Devi ki.
So anyway, later that evening, there was a darshan. And when he told the little girl that, you're not initiated, there was a sannyasi there, Guru Kripa Maharaj, and he gave her a rose to pacify her. okay? So in the evening, there was a darshan. So all the moms were coming up and saying, Srila Prabhupada, can you give my daughter a name, please? Okay. So one lady went up and Srila Prabhupada said, yeah, sure. Your little girl's name can be Pushpa, meaning flower. And then that little girl's mother went up and said, Srila Prabhupada, can you also give my daughter a name? And he said, yeah, Rose. What? That sounds good. But if you think about the name for rose in Sanskrit, it's not very romantic. It's Gulab. So I don't know if that little girl could have gone through life with a name like Gulab. So anyway, next day we went to the Botanical Gardens. It was beautiful there in Melbourne. Beautiful, beautiful. And it was just the right time of year, April. And every tree and flower bed and everything had a sign, botanical sign, Latin and English like that. So the ladies were in the back, and so the intelligent ladies, when Prabhupada would step on a leaf, they would take the leaf and keep it forever. But I was with one girl, she was Sankirtan devotee, very adventurous. She grabbed my hand, she said, we're not staying in the back, we're going to the front, okay? So we went to the front, and Srila Prabhupada stopped at a tree, picked a leaf and crushed it, and smelt it, and said, what is this tree? And the devotee said, oh, it's a camphor tree. And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, that's Radharani's favorite fragrance. So anyway, then a devotee came up and said, Srila Prabhupada, I've really been thinking about something. You say that when we live in temples, it's like Vaikuntha. And Vaikuntha means without anxiety. But I find I'm always in anxiety. And Prabhupada said, yes, that shows that you're a human being. So you'll always be in anxiety if you're a human being, but you get to pick what type of anxiety. It can be material or spiritual. Okay? So, I was able to get it tested out that afternoon because one devotee, God sister, came to me and said, I'd really like you to wash Srila Prabhupada's clothes, will you do it? And I'm like, yeah, I'll really do it. And then I thought, I want to do the best I can. And at that time I was a Pujari assistant, so I could get hold of any kind of oils or anything that I wanted. And I thought, oh, I'll just sprinkle some sandalwood oil on Prabhupada's cloth, and it'll smell beautiful. Okay, so I got the oil and put it all over the cloth, and then I washed it in hot soapy water, and then dried it, and then hung it up to dry. And when it was dry, I ironed it, and what was there? Big oil blobs. And oh, what am I going to do? I thought back to how he said anxiety, So it was the greatest anxiety. So in those days, about 10% of the devotees were householders, and about 90% were brahmacharis and brahmacharinis. And Prabhupada said, actually, he said that in Melbourne, in a few years it's going to be opposite. And everyone thought, no, we believe everything Prabhupada said, but not that. Okay, so then I went to the householder's house, and I said, oh, I need some money to buy a kind of potion to get rid of the oil in Prabhupada's cloth. So they gave me some money, I ran to the store and I came back and I sprayed it on everything, I soaked it full of this potion. And then I washed it in hot soapy water and rinsed it, and there wasn't enough time to dry it. So I ironed it. And then when I ironed it, big blobs of oil came out, and I just didn't know what to do. I was in so much anxiety. This is my spiritual master, and I'm giving him something that is not perfect. It's cloth, silken cloth, with big oil stains on it, right? So, you know, I ironed it, and I went to Hari Soy, his servant at the time, and I said, Hari Soy, I don't know what to do. I just wanted Srila Prabhupada to have beautiful smelling cloth, and I'm afraid there's oil all over it. And he goes, no problem at all. Srila Prabhupada often has oil stains on his cloth, because after his massage, he's got oil on his body. And so then I felt much better, like incredibly, much better. So anyway, is that all right? A little anecdote from Mayapur. Okay, so in those days, Australia is a country full of wonderful milk and milk products. So every time that we went to see Srila Prabhupada, we'd take 2 kilos of ghee. Every devotee would take 2 kilos of ghee to present to Srila Prabhupada. And I said to one god sister, I want to take something extra. I want to take something special for Srila Prabhupada. And so she said, take full cream powdered milk. And I'm like, what? Full cream powdered milk, you can get it anywhere. But I thought, I'll do it anyway, because she recommended it, and she'd seen Srila Prabhupada, she'd been to Mayapur before like that. So I got the full cream powdered milk. It's very cheap too, very cheap. So it didn't seem like a very good present, but anyway. So in those days, the ladies were able to see Srila Prabhupada. 2 ladies were able to see Srila Prabhupada for 2 minutes at a time, right? So we went up to his room in Mayapur, and this other Mataji and I, we went in, and we presented the ghee, and I felt so embarrassed. Okay, I'm going to show him the full cream powdered milk. So I was so embarrassed to do it, you know, to give something which I thought wasn't a great worth to your spiritual master. So anyway, I presented it to him. Oh, Srila Prabhupada, here's some full cream powdered milk. And he goes, what? Fantastic. His whole face started glowing. Fantastic. Tell my cook to make all my sweets out of this. And then, you know, I just felt like I pleased my spiritual master, and my whole life was worthwhile. So, and then in those days, the ladies were able to see Srila Prabhupada for 2 minutes a day, and he started talking about cows, protection of cows, how to love cows, how we should have nice milk and everything like that. And that was for about half an hour. So I really, really felt benedicted. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was so sweet. And Ricardo, is your daughter here? Yeah, would you all like to give your offering? Yes, please. Then Ricardo and Gurangi will give their offering.
Jump up. You can lift the mic.
We're gonna share the mic. I'll be sitting down. So we'll do a song. I'm sure you all know that shloka, that verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's our attitude. That's the attitude of the devotee. That's the verse. And we're grateful to Srila Prabhupada for giving us access to this treasure chest of knowledge. He gave us things to do every day. That's what I like about Srila Prabhupada. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada, for giving us access to this Srimad Bhagavatam and for giving us things to do every day. And please don't judge. I hope the sound is okay. That's the old song that we had. This one's the new one. That's the old one.
We're traveling through bodies all the time. The same thing will happen when we die. Those who are sober, their fears are over. They close their eyes with a smile. Taking a swing traveling through bodies all the time. The same thing will happen when we die. Those who are sober, their fears are over. They close their eyes with a smile.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Gaurangi and Bihari Prabhu. What a special family you all have. So we're going to move on to Pushpanjali now. But just a few announcements before we move on to Pushpanjali, in case you all aren't aware. Tomorrow we have a special class, Bhagavad Shravanam class tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. with Chaitanya and Charan Prabhu. So please come for that if you're able to. It's going to be really amazing. And then we also have coming in up in October a special retreat with Mahatma Prabhu and Geet Nagri from October 14th to 17th. And we just reduced the price actually to bare minimum because we're basically offering this as a service to our community. So for the whole 14th and 17th is only $300, including all meals and accommodations, which is a really good deal. And there's transportation available as well when you sign up. We're going to be having devotees carpool, and so we really want to offer this as an offering to our community, to our devotees. So please sign up for that up on the website. We need to get more sign-ups to be able to actually run the retreat. And then we also have, we have my notes here. Jahnavi, our dear Jahnavi, who's here, is going to be doing a U.S. tour, and she's going to be starting here in New York on October 21st. And information is on the website about buying tickets, so please support Jahnavi and come to her first concert. We're really excited for it. And then if you know, last announcement, if you know anyone who would be interested in actually having an ashram training experience and learning what it's like to live in an ashram and practice Krishna consciousness, all day, every day, we have an ashram training program here, and we have spots available right now for that. So information is also on our website. And just one last note, the Mahatma Prabhu retreat is under the temple page. If you click on temple on the website and scroll down, that's where you'll see the link to sign up for Mahatma Prabhu. So thank you all so much for being here this weekend. I also you see someone carrying some flowers or something back there, Vandana and Nirvika. They have done so much service. I just wanted to give a special shout out to them. You're doing so much service over the last couple of days. Nirvika and Vandana, just wave your hands. We're just thank you. Non-stop doing service. We did the flower decorations for Balaram Jayanti on the altar, the flower decorations here on the altar for Janmashtami, and Marissa, who's not here with us today, did these flower decorations in the temple room. And also Krishna Doya, who's back there right now, he cooked the feast for us today. Thank you to him and his wife for cooking the feast. And a big thank you to all the volunteers who came together. Vasudev for running the whole Pujari department, Goju Rapan, who over here was doing service in the Devi room. We had so many volunteers over the last few days. Tiffany Virawat back there, Lee, who was on our hospitality team, Evan, so many devotees came together on the hospitality team, the decoration team, the production team. Our ashram members were running that, and we're just really, really grateful to all of our volunteers. So one last big round of applause for them. Okay, now Vasudev will lead us in Pushpanjali. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Everyone please stand up and come forward. So one more announcement from our dear Krishna Guru. There's help needed in the kitchen on the 6th floor for cleaning up. So if any volunteers are inspired to go up to the kitchen, help is needed on the 6th floor kitchen. You can go on up. Thank you so much.
So Hare Krishna everyone, welcome again. We all move forward to this area here. And we want to give some space to Prabhupada disciples here in front to offer their flowers. So take a good amount of flowers in your hand. We'll have more if you don't have enough, but we'll offer flowers 3 times. So divide whatever you have in 3. And for those who are not familiar, what we'll do is we'll offer prayers to Srila Prabhupada and the entire Guru Parampara and Radha and Krishna and Lord Chaitanya and all his associates. And then when we've done that, then we say Esha Pushpanjalihi, which means please accept this offering of flowers. And then you can offer your flowers and make your obeisances. And then we'll do that 2 more times. We can move all a little bit more forward and in this corner here. Yeah. So the idea behind this is that the Guru, Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, he doesn't stand alone. He represents our entire lineage of spiritual masters. He represents Lord Chaitanya, he represents Radha and Krishna. So we worship him with offering obeisances to Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, and all their associates and energies. And that makes his worship complete. So let's chant responsibly. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Yadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Savadhutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Neshatarine Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Bhakti Siddhanta
Bhakti Siddhanta
Saraswati
Iti Namine
Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Dayitaya Prabhadaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayine Prabhave Namaha Madhuryo Jvala Premaja Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Apasiddhanta Bhantaharine Namo Gaurakishoraya Sakshat Vairagyamurtaye Vipralamba Sambodhe Padambhojaya Te Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Sarupaya Rupanuga Vadayate Gauravirbhava Bhumestvam Nirdeshta Sajjana Priyaha Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Yevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratushe Namaha Panchatattva Atmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Twetam Surato Pango Mamamanda Matergati Matsarvasva Padambhoja Radha Madanamohana Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadaha Srimad Ratnagara Sinhasanastho Srimad Radha Śrīla Govinda Deva Preshthalibi Sevyamano Smarami Śrīmad Rasa Rasarambhi Vamshivata Tatastitaha Harshan Venu Swaner Gopi
Gopinatha Shristunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Tinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Desha Pushpanjali His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Desha Pushpanjali Fine grace of Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Desha Pushpanjali His Divine Grace is Srimad Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Yes. Oh. Haribo.
So now like Guru Puja will worship Srila Prabhupada and we'll request whoever is scheduled to lead Kirtan.
Either one.
Samsaradava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karunya Jahanaganatvam
Samsaradava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karunya Jahanaganatvam
Nitya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Vande Guru Shri Mahaprabhu Ki Dhanandritya Gita Vadidramanya Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu Ki Dhanandritya Gita Vadidramanya Manasura Sena Romanchakampa Rutaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Romanchakampa Rutaranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Shri Vigrahara Dhananidyanana Shingaradhanma Virajanado Shri Vigrahara Dhananidyanana Bhagavata Sada Sadhana Dittam Haribhakta Sangam Sadhurita Shri Bhagavata Sada Sadhana Dittam Haribhakta Sangam Vitvaiva Trikutim Ajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Vitvaiva Trikutim Ajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Shri Radhikama Abhayora Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupana Shri Radhikama Abhayora Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupana Pratikshana Svamdhana Lolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinda Pratikshana Tasyaya Sasti Sandhya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Jaya Subham Tasyaya Sasti Sandhya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Jaya Subham Tasyaya Sasti Sandhya Vande Guru Shri Bhakti Vedanta Swami
Srila Prabhupada ki!
Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Asto Tarasata Shri Srimad Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jayom Nityalala Pravista Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Rasati Thakur Prabhupada ki Jayom Nityalala Pravista Om Vishnupad Kishordas Balaji Maharaj ki Jayom Nityalala Pravista Om Vishnupad Sachidananda Bhaktivedanta Thakur ki Shri Shri Sanatan Bhattaragnath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhattadasu Raghunath Sargoswami Prabhupada ki Thanks to Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopal Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan ki Ganga Devi ki Yamuna Devi ki Bhakti Devi ki Tulsi Maharani ki Harinam Sankirtan ki Mayapurnavari Dham ki Rajabhumi Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Srila Prabhupada Vyasa Puja Maha Mahotsav ki Srila Prabhupada ki Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Gaura Premanandi. Namaste Narasimhaya Namaste Narasimhaya Valadara Varadaya Kanta
ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Oh.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Okay, one more time. Srila Prabhupada ki Prabhupada ki Prabhupada ki Okay, I'll say another one. Thanks. So yeah, thank you all so much for coming to Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja Day Festival and for being here for festivities. I think most of you all were also here yesterday for Janmashtami, so thank you for being part of this transcendental marathon with us. And we have prasadam for you all in the back. So we have a big feast cooked by Krishna Jaya and his dear wife. Where are they? I don't see them. I want
They're
to
swamped
thank
in
them.
pots.
Let's give them a big round of applause. And a big thank you to Susanna who's back there, Susanna and Nityananda Chandra. Susanna, I actually want to give a shout out to Susanna. She's done so much service here and so much production, and she's actually going to be moving out on Tuesday. So can we just give a big round of applause for her? Tireless servant here at Bhakti Center, always behind the scenes, and we all just love her so much and wish her best in her travels in Colombia. She's going to be traveling, but then she'll be coming back to be part of Bhakti Center, so we will see her again. And also, just one last announcement. After Prasadam, if anyone would like to help us clean up, we would be most grateful for anyone who would like to help the devotees, the ashramites, clean up the temple room. So that would just be, helping with the prasadam and the sweeping and the mopping. Thank you so much. Happy prasadam, happy Vyasa Puja.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you, Champa.